As Xi Jinping and Donald Trump prepare to meet for the first time, what will be the fallout in other parts of the world? I talked to a prominent Indian scholar who was a senior advisor to the U.S. State Department. We'll also be taking a look at one of the less talked about drivers for Donald Trump's decision-making, his 5 years in a military academy in New York. Welcome to The Point. I'm Liu Xin. President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are expected to meet on Thursday in the U.S. Many observers are waiting to see how this meeting will shape not only bilateral ties, but relations amongst other countries in the world as well. This was the question I put to a senior fellow of the Carnegie Endowment for Peace on a recent visit he made to China. Ashley Tellis has spent decades studying issues to do with international security and anti-terrorism in South Asia. He was also a senior advisor on U.S. policy in the region. I also asked him what America First would mean to India and its relationship with other Asian countries, and how China and India can coexist peacefully as two emerging powers in Asia.
I think it is an extremely important meeting. First, for the obvious reason. I mean, it's a meeting between two countries whose relationship is really going to shape not only the future of politics in Asia, but the politics in other parts of the world as well. And I think there should be two objectives for this meeting. One is it's important to build a personal relationship between the two leaders, irrespective of the issues. The second is there should be some willingness on both sides to develop a common frame of reference for managing the challenges that both sides face. I think it's too early in the administration's life to imagine that we will be able to develop concrete solutions to concrete problems. I think that comes down the line. But if there is a conversation about our perceptions of the world, what kind of world order we would like to see evolve, that would be a huge step forward. And so if both sides concentrate on the personal chemistry and concentrate on having a very honest discussion about their worldviews, I think it would be a major contribution to putting U.S.-China relations on an even keel.
What would be the ramification for other countries in Asia, for instance for India, if U.S. and China come back to a healthy development track of their relationship?
I think that is actually a good thing. My own view is that U.S.-China relations have to be maintained in a certain balance for stability to exist throughout Asia. If U.S.-China relations are frayed, or if they become conflictual, it's dangerous because it puts all the other Asian partners in a position where they have to choose. They have to choose one side or the other. That is something they don't want to do.
No.
And that is something that is not productive either for them or for us. And so to the degree that we can keep our bilateral relationship in a cooperative frame, I think that just turns out to be productive for everyone concerned.
You talk about for other people to learn from. A recent case in point is Australia. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is in Australia, and Australian scholars have been talking about Australia feeling itself between a rock and a hard place, between a rising China and the traditional ally of the United States. Will India feel itself in a similar situation? How do you compare the position of India vis-a-vis other countries such as Australia in what they're at this moment?
Well, the dilemmas are true for India as well. So the same dilemmas that Australia has, India has as well, but they're not as acute. And they're not as acute because the economic relationship that Australia has with China is far deeper than the economic relationship that India has with China. So while in principle there is a balancing act, the burdens on the balancing are much more difficult in the case of Australia than with India. There's a second complication. Australia is a treaty ally of the United States, but Australia is a very strong economic partner of China. And so it feels the tugging and the pulls between the economics and the politics far more concrete than India feels, because India does not have any political obligations to the United States. The United States does not have political obligations to India. And India's economic ties with China and India's economic ties with the US are actually much weaker than Australia's ties with both China and the United States. So India faces the problem but it's not as bad.
Is that an opportunity for India? Where do you see the future direction of India? Eventually, I think you might have to balance these two relationships as the economic and security cooperation between each side grows deeper. I mean, the US and India have been stepping up their cooperation in the past year pretty much with the signing of several important bilateral agreements.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The key word is opportunity. And for India, the opportunity must be to deepen economic ties with both China and the United States. What has happened so far in the US-India relationship is that the diplomatic elements and the strategic elements have grown, but the economic element is still relatively weak. And so it's a bit unbalanced. And my view has always been that to sustain the relationship productively, the economic tie has to be strengthened in pace with the diplomatic and the strategic tie. And the same is true for China, India's relationship with China.
Everybody's having this question on their mind with this new American administration, with this talk about America first, about Buy America, Hire America. How will that impact India in itself and in its relationship with the big countries such as the US and China?
It's certainly going to be a challenging time for India, as it is for all of America's partners throughout the world. The impact is going to be mixed, but on balance, I think it will be favorable for India. And let me explain that. For a long time, the United States has come around to the view that we need a strong relationship with India in order to preserve a balance of power in Asia. And that will not change even in a Trump administration, though the terms under which we relate to India will certainly be different. But the bottom line is that India is seen as an opportunity for the United States. And I think that is really the foundation that will keep the relationship actually in good shape.
What about the challenges this America First might bring to India?
There are several challenges that America First brings. The first is the terms of engagement. In the past, the US was very comfortable being generous to India in terms of its policies without asking for much in return. I think that is no longer going to be the case. Under President Trump, the US will seek reciprocity. So it will continue to work with India. It will continue to give India many of the things that India wants, but it will be asking for some things in return. The second area where I think there will be challenges will be in bilateral economic relations. The United States will be seeking bigger access to the Indian market. It will be revisiting policies with respect to immigration. With respect to H-1B visas, the visa on which many Indians come to work in the United States. And as you know, President Trump's America First requires a re-emphasis on making in America at exactly the same time when Prime Minister Modi is emphasizing a make in India.
And China emphasizing made in China.
Made in China. So you have a potential for some degree of friction if it is not accompanied by a set of understandings, which I think will be important to work out in the months ahead.
Let's talk a bit about the perception of China in India. The impression I get, or my colleagues get, is often that the press in India seem to perceive a greater threat from China than what China really is. Is that the case?
I think that is the case. And I see that as linked intimately to the psychology of weaker powers. So if you look at India, the concerns about China loom large. If you go to Pakistan, the concerns about India loom large. So the psychology of weaker powers puts them in a position where they tend to amplify fears, anxieties in ways that may not always be accurate representations of reality.
What is your personal view? Do you think Asia, do you think the world is not big enough for two countries, two powers in Asia?
I think the world is big enough for both China and India. You know, Chinese leaders and Indian leaders have emphasized that same theme. But the problem is not with whether the world is big enough. The problem is with policies that often are pursued by countries without prior coordination, without proper communication. And so one needs to look at the issues of communication and coordination in order to realize that vision of a world big enough. And I think that is the task really, not only for China and India states.
The world is watching what comes out of the first personal meeting between Xi and Trump. Some are asking whether this is going to be a game of bargaining with high stakes. Its impact will likely go way beyond the boundaries of these two countries and possibly even the boundary of Donald Trump's term in office. Something like 50 years is on the lips of some people, but the signals coming out of both Washington and Beijing indicate for now both sides want this meeting to be a success. I think this is already a very good starting point. With the vast amount of press coverage given over to what is driving President Trump as he struggles with both Democrats and now Republicans in formulating and enacting many of his policies, it is interesting to note that there has been little mention of his academic background. Not many people know, for instance, that Trump attended one of New York's prestigious academies, the New York Military Academy, which coincidentally is now headed up by a Chinese-American woman by the name of Zhang Jie. The former principal of New York City's elite Stuyvesant High School, Zhang Jie is the first Asian and first woman to lead the academy. She describes her goal as being to provide a unique opportunity to develop young leaders who are set apart for excellence. What an interesting combination of factors, and that's why we invited Zhang Jie to our studio the other day. I began by asking her about her experience at the Stuyvesant High School right before she joined the New York Military Academy.
Like any middle and high schools, and New York military's primary goal is to prepare students for the next step, next page in life, which really means to provide the opportunity for them to accept or to further their education in higher ed, right?
But it's a military academy. Is there any difference in the curriculum?
Definitely. So, even prior to my arrival, right, the mission of the school is to do academics. So that's a perception that everybody, sometimes misunderstands, right? The military component is pretty much a program that is throughout their years, the students' years at NEMA, we call it NEMA, it's New York Military Academy, just to fill their years with that manages their daily life. So, for example, they get up at exactly the same time, often at 6 a.m., right? And they go through activities such as we call a PT, which is physical training, right? Going through things like a formation, something the military system calls, when they go to eat, right? We line them up, have a formality of sort of like imitation and practice of the military life. So all of those are used to build their physical body, right, and strong body and a strong mind, and their leadership skills.
Did the transaction or did the acquisition, let's say, by the Chinese side of the school changed anything at all?
I wouldn't say that it has changed the structure of how school is operated, but with my background, coming from a strong academic background, with other new additions to the school, we are trying to make stronger academic programs. One example I want to give you is that, STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is a, very popular acronym. And we're trying to increase the course offerings. For example, we added an elective in robotics, which is something that we're trying to add. But I must say that the general structure was in place. Yeah.
You, as a Chinese American, being the new superintendent to the school, what kind of reaction did you get among the students, and how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, a couple of positions I took even before coming to the New York Military Academy, such as the position as the principal of Slabs High School, was also a kind of a very new thing because there was never an Asian woman being on that position. So, and another school that I served as the principal prior to Stuyvesant, Queens High School for the Sciences at York College. It's also a very fine high school in New York City. I was obviously, again, the only, the first Asian woman. So I've gone through this so many times.
Yeah.
It's shocking to many people, but I'm kind of used to it. Yet I'm nervous about it too.
What do you think is the central philosophy of your work as superintendent?
So it actually, it's stated in the school's mission statement,
Yeah.
right? So I'm trying to implement and continue the school's mission, right? So as stated in the mission, NEMA's mission is to build students' mind, body, character, right? And to prepare them for further education and enable them to become leaders and responsible citizens. So I think those really state what I believe in. Yeah.
So whether Western or Eastern, these are the same qualities we want to instill.
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
children.
It's the same values.
Same
Yes,
values.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump. I mean, we're all
Yes,
very
sure.
curious of the school that he grew up in, at least spent some part of his time in. What was he like in the school, and how much is his present or his years in the school still being felt by the rest of the school?
Well, first of all, he was there in the 60s, right, and way before me, yeah, so I wouldn't know exactly what his life was there at NEMA, but from all of our understanding is that he has been openly speaking about his experience at the New York Military Academy, and very positive, and he really gives a lot of credit to the education he received from the school. So that's, and we're very proud, we're happy that that's how he feels. And even after the election, obviously on behalf of the school, you know, the leadership team at Military Academy sent him a letter to congratulate, you know, him for his success, for the result of the election, and he personally wrote a letter back to us. Wow. Yeah, and what was really amazing was that there was a little stamp on the letter that says, has been seen by the president on such and such a date. So it definitely came from the White House.
Wow.
So that was, you know, something that we were very happy about, his attitude towards the school. And I don't know if you're aware, on the date of inauguration, presidential inauguration, through his office, all of our students were invited to march.
Well,
Yes.
as the school where Donald Trump studied, I'm sure you're all very proud, but on the other hand, I think you must not ignore all the kind of opposition that he has encountered. How do you look at the difficulty that he has been facing so far?
So people have different opinions, right? But we, as his alma mater, and as a school that he spent 5 years in, right? We're very proud. He is a very well-known alumnus, right? Even way before the election, his picture was on the wall, recognized as an outstanding alumnus. So I want to say that I'm proud of what I see him and his comments, his reaction about the school. So to me, he's definitely a successful alumnus.
Let's talk a bit about the kind of trend we are seeing in the kind of competition, if you will, or comparison between Chinese and Western education or learning methods. For instance, the latest piece of information we had was that HarperCollins, famous publishing
The
house,
mathematics, yeah.
Yeah, they are introducing a whole set of mathematics textbooks from Shanghai without changing anything, just plainly translating it and introduce it to schools in the UK. What do you think of this kind of trend that more and more the Chinese learning method, at least in the elementary school period, are being increasingly recognized in the West?
Right. Well, that's great question, because I was a lifelong math teacher. Yeah. So after leaving China, my first career, I should say, in the United States was a math teacher in a public school, right? So from my teaching days and from my days as the principal of different schools, now the third school as the school leader, and also from my early experience in China, although I didn't have a very formal education because my childhood was exactly fell into the period of Cultural Revolution, right? However, from learning and observing and participating in educational conversations, I definitely think there are many, many good components and good aspects of Chinese mathematical teaching that we can use in the States, right? I remember something, a saying says, practice makes perfect, right? So from the current international students who are attending NEMA from China, because I have 8 right now, 8 students in China, and from my observation, they demonstrate much stronger computational skills. Yeah, it's amazing how fast they are when it comes to calculations and doing the math that we have. So, for example, our 8th graders from China are easily placed in 9th grade or 10th grade math classes in New York Military Academy. So it shows that not only they are advanced in terms of the concept, they're also very, very advanced in skills.
So looking at this so more and more people are realizing the values or the strengths of the Chinese learning system. Looking ahead, do you think this is going to be the trend for countries in the West to look more and more to the East to find what's good for them, whereas China has been doing that for the past 30 years?
I think what's being recognized is the amount of time spent on learning math and also the depth of mathematics that youngsters in China that are being valued in the Western countries.
Is it just on math? Do you think there is other things, or it's a mutual learning process?
I think right now it's more math than anything else because math extends to some science courses such as physics, because it's really primarily I would say an extension of application of mathematics. So I think math is a core conversation that we talk about.
What do the Chinese learning system can get from the American one?
So I would say, coming again from a system that I have worked on for 30 years, right? So I think in the States, what we do, even in teaching math, is to share thought process, right? So one good example I always use to compare is writing geometric proofs, right? So in China, when I learned, and also I share with my students who are learning now, is that you really just write the conclusion, where in United States, you have to write the reason in words. So if these 2 triangles are congruent, you have to actually write it out. So I thought that is a good feature of the math teaching in America, which is to kind of spell out and share your thought process.
Finally, more Chinese input for this New York Military Academy to prosper in the long-term future? Maybe more Chinese students, more Chinese teachers?
I definitely hope so, and I really hope as the new leader of the New York Military Academy, I have the opportunity to serve more students from China. Right. A few things we have begun doing is to run a summer program, which it's in the works, right? And we also welcome students from China to come to almost like a shadow our students in our schools during winter break, which we have done a few times, that were very successful. And as a result of that, some students decided to apply and come later to become regular students. So I hope more and more of that will happen, yes.
To become schoolmate with Donald Trump.
Absolutely, yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are all a product of our upbringing. The world talks a lot about Donald Trump, the businessman who has vacillated back and forth and issued contradictory views of the world. But we also need to take note of his 5 years in a military academy where discipline was the order of the day and where his alumni learned to have a strong belief in themselves. This should help us to understand the driving forces behind the decisions he makes. That's all for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX, and you can watch our previous shows on the CGTN channel of YouTube. Click on the playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.